HiSec Buyback offers a 90% JITA anywhere in HiSec. Simply go to hisec.evebuyback.com, appraise your items, create a contract, and get paid quickly.
This is Talking in Stations, a show about EVE Online. Today in the station, we've got a few of the regular crew, and we're going to be trying to predict the future, reading what we can from the scrap metal left in space, from Zkill, from Dotlan, etc. Joining me today to help out, we've got Grigor and Mersu.
Good evening.
Good evening to you, as well as Nick Bison.
Howdy, everybody.
And Zhao Sen.
Hello, hello.
Now, before we get going, obviously there's going to be a lot of predictions in today's show, but we're also going to be basing it on a lot of data and information. This is going to be a bit of behind the scenes. What does research look like if you're trying to figure out what's going on in EVE Online? And when doing research, you have to acknowledge your biases. So I personally have fought against the Imperium for a lot of my EVE career as a member of FI.RE Coalition. I'm also presently a member of Brave Empire, which is technically part of Brave. There are folks in my alliance and in my corporation who are much more let's support Brave as best we can than I am. I'm just here because Brave Empire is the only ones doing this sort of thing that they do, which is providing access to structures without being able to be war deck. Let's go around the horn and see what are everybody else, like what's your history, who have you fought with, who have you fought against, that sort of thing. Let's start with you, Grigorin.
Well, I've been playing since 2019, so 2.25 years roughly. I started out in EVE University, but after a few months living in a couple of different wormholes, I have since then I've spent my entire career in Pandemic Horde. First with Waffles, where I also flew a lot with Wrecking Crew, and then with Capital Fusion, where I am now, a former Circle of Two corporation that is had a lot of success in Pandemic Horde.
Right on, so solidly on the PAPI side. Shen, how about you?
I started this game a bit, like a few months plus a year, like a year and a half, basically. As of right now, I've been with A1 since like I think 20 days after I started playing EVE. So during the war, we are on the PAPI side, but as of right now, we are neutral to both.
Good old standings resets. We'll be going through a few of those later in the show. Nick, how about yourself?
Oh gosh, not a great deal of excitement. Started in 2007, moved out to the drone lands when it was fairly new under Iron. Fought against Bob during that, and we got blown out. So we ended up just north of Morsus Mihi when they were up north in the Tribute area. And when that wound down, I ended up in HiSec for a while due to real life stuff. Went back out up north again, joined up with Wildly Inappropriate until they kind of Y-dotted themselves. Thank Tomcat, the alliance leader, for that. Dog. Life got in the way again, went back to HiSec, went back up Tribute with CO2, fought with the Goons for a while up there, and everybody knows the story of that. When the first World War B or Casino War, whatever you want to call it, in late 2016 hit, and CO2 decided that we didn't want to play with them anymore. That then moved down. Well, then Pandemic Legion and them NC kind of turned on us because they wanted that for renter space. So we ended up with Test down in Impasse. Test was over in Esoteria until Test stabbed us in the back, and CO2 got, So I don't like any of them, damn it. So that's pretty much me.
All right, fair enough. Well, let's get into it. Somebody in chat has already mentioned PAPI doesn't exist anymore. and this could just be some spin. It could also be a reference to the recent standings resets that we've saw posted around the place. So let's take a look at that, see what's going on with all these standing resets. Now, Shen, you mentioned that you are currently neutral. Previously, your group was a member of PAPI. What have the standings resets looked like from the AOM perspective?
I think Fraternity streamed our alliance meeting, so I think part of this is public. So we are resetting Imperium as neutral. Well, we didn't reset them; they were neutral to us before. We're resetting the entire PAPI alliance, PAPI coalition, except for Evictus and Vindictive.
Ooh, are they joining up, or is it sort of a let them crash on our couch sort of thing?
No, I think we're still part of PIBC as a coalition in like Paragonso and Esoteria. So there's nothing like really crashing anyone's couch, the type of thing. We're just hanging along, I guess.
All right, fair enough. Let's focus on the other portion, or another portion of PAPI. Some would say the leader, or at least the instigator of the coalition. Test Alliance, please ignore. They are in an interesting spot in terms of resets, where some groups are resetting them, some groups are resetting all of PAPI except for Test. And the current narrative is that Tests are going to live on PanFam's couch up in Outer Passage in the drone regions to sort of have a rebuilding phase. This narrative is helped along by the fact that Brave is also seemingly a group which has managed to escape some resets by other major entities, also for similar reasons. They're going up and they're moving into Geminate, and they're getting some help by staying blue with certain larger powers. As to whether or not you believe that narrative is entirely up to you, but it is certainly true that, as an example, Horde. Let me just pull up my notes. Yeah, so Horde is not resetting Brave, where NC Dot, as an example, is going to be resetting. So we've got some interesting... Go ahead.
No, I was just say that could be a geographic thing too, because Brave, didn't they mention, or I'm not sure, may end up in Nullsec. So it might be geographically just, don't want to really keep a huge blue list, which they're not historically don't do. And Futility does bring up a good point in chat where he says PAPI doesn't exist anymore. As an organized entity, I think he's 100% right.
Yeah, as a member of Pandemic Horde, I think that's mainly because, well, the announcement sounded like Test and Brave were both going to be reset a little bit later after they got set up in their new homes. It looks like Brave is currently trying to set up in Geminate, and Geminate is a region which Horde controls a large portion of. So I think that part of the reason why Horde has not yet reset them is because it would be rather awkward to get set up in this new region when you're neutral to the people to control a large portion of it.
Fair enough. I'm just browsing Brave's killboard here because I checked .land, and there are no, as far as I can tell, Brave sovereignty structures up in Geminate yet. So I wanted to see, like, okay, is the rumor that they're heading to Geminate, is it backed up by any sort of facts that we can see? And we do, in fact, see that they are flying pretty consistently over in the Geminate area. Go ahead.
Yeah, let's check to see what upcoming timers are in Geminate.
Hey, good call.
While that's getting looked up, I think it's fair to mention that Goons are doing a pretty damn good job of cleaning up Delve. They're a plus 50 on solve changes right now.
Yeah, don't let me forget, Nick. Let's check the timer history in Delve and see if there's anything upcoming or when the last timer was. I heard that about a week ago the last timer fell, and so they're sort of ticking over on the clock in terms of when they can get certain upgrades online. This is the timer history. I want upcoming timer.
Yeah, and in Geminate, there are 9 SOV timers coming in the next 2 days. All of them are systems currently held by Darkside and Psychotic Tendencies.
So where are they living? Darkside looks to be the constellation directly adjacent to Genin. So BWF is the Nullsec system right adjacent to that low-sec entry system. It used to be... Oh man, I was in Horde when they lived in Geminate, and I want to say they staged in BWF. Correct me if I'm wrong.
That was correct at one point.
At one point.
I think they might have staged at another Geminate system, but by the time I joined, the staging was R10 in Kalevala Expanse, where it is now.
Ah, yeah, the move to TKE. I remember that. I wasn't particularly plugged in, but it very well could be. And if I were brave and I were looking to move into a low-sec adjacent region for easy access to Empire space, make it easy for folks to move in, this is definitely the constellation that I would take first. And we'll have to see in the coming days, when do these timers come out? They come out tomorrow around EUTZ, 14 hours up to 18, 19 hours. So it'll be interesting to watch and see who plops down structures if these do in fact fall. Another interesting question would be, if Darkside does lose this space, where do they go? But before we get to that, let's address the elephant in the room and talk about Delve. Are there any upcoming timers in Delve? Let me look that.
Yeah, the short answer is there's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's 8 timers, all TCUs right now, coming up in anywhere from one starts in about 48 minutes and all the way through a day and a half and change.
Yeah, we've even got some ongoing, right?
Yeah, 3 ongoing and 5 upcoming that are the ongoing ones are currently ticking, and I assume that goons will toast them without much stopping them.
Yeah, if we look at
one's already down to 4%, so yeah, they're steadily moving down. They're taking care of business.
And for those unfamiliar with the mechanics with these SOV timers, they start out with a defender score of 60%. So what that percent means is it's how much progress the defenders have made. They start out with 60%. If the defender is successfully in Tosis or the passive regen accrues over time, that score will go up. When it reaches 100%, the timer is saved. The structure lives. If it goes down to 0% due to attackers making progress, the structure dies. So this one at 4%, it is very soon to die. Help me out. Who recalls the percentage that you get by finishing one of the nodes? Is it 15%? I have to look that one up.
It's 5, I believe.
5%? So this one dies the next node, assuming there are no defenders also hitting nodes.
Yeah, and these are all TCU timers, which makes me think that Goonswarm has already taken out all the iHubs in Delve, and iHubs are generally considered to be the more important of the 2 types of SOV structure.
Well, let's have a look. iHub owner. Go ahead.
And in fact, I've got the iHub owner up, and if you notice, TNT's got their 2 in the Helm's Deep constellation, same 2 they had before, already planted their flags in there. So that's cool. Good to see them getting some space back.
What's the history with TNT?
I saw last week, I think Delve are all cleared of PAPI iHubs. And just one thing with Geminate, I think I want to go back to, which is Geminate, half of Geminate is Horde, and one constellation is NPC constellation. So there aren't that much space left for Brave to start with, and it's really close to Lowsec. So with regions like that, we can see Veil of Silent, for example, that you can constantly be harassed by Snuff and other Lowsec entities that can literally undock from Jita and then jump to your system.
Well, they can't undock their dreads from Jita and jump to your system, but
Black Ops, that's what I meant to say, Black Ops. So it's possible to undock from Jita and then group jump to Veil of Silence at least. I don't know about
I mean,
Geminate. I think it's even closer.
with filaments, is that really so important anymore? Because people could get into your space with filaments,
Yeah,
with
well,
wormholes.
it depends on what kind of content that you want. If you just want a small game, just random PvP, filaments are great. But if you want to have targets and constantly harassing one region, then if you're close to Nullsec, then you'll be in much danger in that sense.
And both of the alliances which have solved timers coming up in Geminate have traditionally been their content has been largely just harassing whoever's near Geminate.
Yeah, so that's a danger of, I think, living near Nullsec, but there are also rewards, right? I think with the recent changes I've seen from CCP, that Nullsec rewards in terms of mining and ratting has been increased with the bounty index and with all kinds of like ores and the gas sites as well. So maybe that's the potential reason why they moved there, or maybe just more content in Nullsec too.
Fair enough, all good points. So Geminate is definitely a region that is more vulnerable to targeted attack. So if Brave has a target on their back for being notably vulnerable, and thus able to get farmed, or if they have a target on the back because somebody has a grudge against them, then they might be in some bigger trouble. But in terms of just random aggression from nullsec roamers, the normal kitey nonsense, then it wouldn't make a huge difference. But that's some good nuance there. Let's pivot our way back into Delve and check the history of timers that happened in Delve for iHub. Because as those timers age, and as the SOV is held by the same group for longer, then you're able to get more and more important iHub upgrades. Does somebody want to give us a rundown of like the most important iHub upgrades in terms of setting up your space?
Well, the most important iHub upgrades are probably the ones that allow you to anchor navigation structures like jump bridges, jump beacons, and cynojammers. Aside from that, iHub upgrades, the notable ones are things that allow like ore prospecting and pirate detection arrays, which add new crabbing sites to the system, and super capital construction facilities, which you need in order to build super capitals in a Sotio in that system that is set up to build them.
Right on. So we're looking here and we see that the last iHub to fall in Delve happened on the 8th. And it happened in the system of PDE TAC U3. It doesn't spring to mind as a particularly strategically important system, but that's certainly like the cutoff point. So the newest iHub is 9 days old, if I can do math, right? So what times are we looking at? Is 21 days is the number off the top of my head that you need for some of the more important iHub upgrades? Somebody fact check me, please.
35 is 35
days.
is for the navigation structures. That was a big deal a few months ago in the war, getting those systems held for 35 days.
So we're just a little over 3 weeks out from having essentially all of the important infrastructure reestablished in Delve, assuming no roadblocks along the way.
I mean, for the pirate and for the mining things, they have levels. They're leveled from level 1 to level 5. It depends on how much effort you want to put into the upgrade. It will, in turn, gives out how, like, say, how many ratting sites you have, or how often the warn response in your belts and things like that.
Well, I think the other thing to look at is when we're talking about time and expectation on that is for infrastructure rebuilding. Look at all those freaking moons they got to go pop Athenors on in order to set their own down. So that's going to take a little bit of issue.
Yeah, not only that, but let's say for a capital, in order for them to safely rat in a system, you need a Fortizar at least to be in that system. So a lot of structure needs to be planted in order for those activities to continue or to restart.
Yeah, but it's hard to build a ship ratting, you know. I got to, looking at the chat, and I got to address something that Daddy Deep put in here, because it's, it's a legit criticism on why the war was a dud. It says, in his opinion, it was about Imperium numbers, ability to make the server unstable. I kind of reject that, and I'll get to that. It's a non-issue. I think the Imperium did and I said this before, I think a few days ago, whether you like them or not, they traded space for time with the floodplains so that they could build up that area. You can claim it's, server mechanics. All right, that's got some validity to it, but classic military, they use the terrain to their advantage. So you got to give the devil his due there.
All right, fair enough. Good points all around. So looking at Delve, you brought up the refineries, and before the Imperium can plop theirs down, they have to kill whatever makes. So I wanted to come in here and check and see where are the refineries still dying? And indeed, we see even just today, we've had multiple Athenors and multiple Tartaras dying. Athenors are the medium-sized refineries that can field the moon drills. Tartaras are the large size, so they have higher bonuses and such. And there are still plenty of those dying every single day. So that is definitely still a work in progress. And with the moon chunks, correct me if I'm wrong, but the longer you set the moon chunk timer for, you get more ore out of it, correct?
That is correct.
Yeah, that's the bigger it gets, and there's 2 rigs of consequence a lot of moonfolk will use. One is a stability rig, which just a T1 version will increase how long the rocks stay in play from 48 to 72 hours. And the other, and the name just escaped me, but it's might be the ore grading. Nah, that's wrong. But
Stability?
it increases the size of the rocks themselves.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, so in Nullsec, often you see Tartaras are being used solely for refinery and reactions, so that's basically their job. But for Athenors, a lot of times you see them as moon mining machines, or they're only used for moon mining because Tartara gives so much better rate yield over the Athenor, so it's not really worth it to use Athenor.
Yeah, if you're using a Tatara for mining, the only thing that it does that an Athenor can't do is it allows Rorquals to dock. So that's typically not likely to be more than one per system, and that one is going to be either refining or reactions.
So with the announced changes to moon ore compression that happened in the July blog update, do we think that's going to change this sort of paradigm of how Athenors and Tartaras are used?
I think you'll be seeing fewer Athenors used for reprocessing, because right now the moon rocks are, since they can't be compressed, the only practical way to deal with them is to reprocess them in the system.
I can see, generally your Tataras that are rigged is going to get a much better, or not generally, it will get a better refine, but I can definitely see a reprocessing module thrown in an Athenor to compress it, to make it easier to move. And that's going to be a fourth quarter thing. So we've still got 3-4 months before we're going to see that bad boy.
And the
Indeed.
thing with compression is a Roku with industrial core on can do compression, so there's no point of using an Athenor for compression either. So I don't know if any of you guys has actually done moon mining, but what you do is you get tethered on the Athenor, like say if there's news or things like that coming in your system. And if you do just regular mining, you mine them and you jetish them into the structure, and you contract to whoever wants to buy the ore in that in the structure, and then they will take care of it afterwards.
And yes, I have done a lot of mining in Nullsec, including moons, and everybody's got their own techniques and styles. And what you just outlined is one that's very efficient if you have the infrastructure to handle it. So that's cool.
Yeah, that's the way that Pandemic Horde handles moon mining. Moon mining has been a decent secondary income source for me, although mostly I buy what other people mine and build stuff with it.
Yeah, also moon mining can be a lucrative way for alliances to get ISK as well. So especially R64s and R32s, if they're in like good spots, then they're often being mined and constantly, basically non-stop. It use a lot of ISK from that.
All right, so Test is losing all of their moon mining infrastructure, all that potential income in Delve. Let's head over to Outer Passage, their future home, and see if they're happening to put anything up. Now, it is worth mentioning there was a lot of hoopla over a recent Fortizar death in Outer Passage. I believe there were many jokes made about Test is safe across the galaxy, etc., etc. People were doomsaying, oh, Test is dead. They can't even form to defend an anchoring Fortizar against 70 bombers. I want to say first and foremost, yeah, this is embarrassing for Test. You don't want like your first major structure blowing up in Outer Passage, especially to a bunch of bombers. But to anyone saying this shows that Test is incapable of forming a fleet that can force off 70 bombers, that's just insane. This is exactly the kind of just negligence that we saw with random supers getting doomsdayed on Keepstars or volleyed by Sotio guns. It's somebody didn't plan ahead, they dropped a structure without planning for a defense fleet, and that got punished. Punishing ignorant, stupidity, unpreparedness is going to happen. And shout out to Goons for staying on top of it and scouting, because I guarantee you a lot of people, if they're heading out to the drone regions, they're going to expect that they can drop structures without anybody punishing them for not having a defense fleet formed. So good on Imperium for scouting this and making sure they can kill it when it anchors. But it is also worth noting that this is not a sign of the impending doom of Test on its own. If there's a trend, if we start seeing lots and lots of structures dying, maybe. But on its own, this is not the death of Test.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to agree with that. Eve is rife with people that screw up. God knows I've been that guy often enough. So, yep, somebody hosed up and they paid the piper for it. That's for sure.
All right, so let's have a look at Outer Passage specifically, and I just want to look at the general kill board and see what is dying, what is living, what's going on. Looks like we've got a PIBC, and this is the... Oh man. Shen, you're gonna have to deal with a lot of confusion here, because Pan-Intergalactic Business Community,
So
the
it's not
Alliance,
yeah,
is not a member of the Coalition, right?
Yeah, that's Pandemic Horde's rental group.
Yeah, so that's a renter alliance. That's not what we were. Yeah. So they're different. We are a coalition and they're an alliance. Even though we use the same names borrowed from Serenity.
Yeah, that PIBC is the rental group that Pandemic Horde does for drone regions.
Fair enough. So while I look up these any structure losses that are happening in Outer Passage from Test, does anybody want to give some thoughts on what it looks like for an alliance to move from one region to another and essentially start from scratch?
First of all, I'll just bring old news, I guess, out, which is, remember when Brave moved from Catch to Aquarius? That just got their logistic head resigned. So you can imagine the amount of work that needs to be done for Alliance, from an Alliance level, in order to move from one region to another.
Well, I moved from Malpais to Venal, and then Tribute down to Impasse. and then impasse back up to fade. So that's, crisscrossing the map. The keys to all of it, to me anyway, is your logistics team. Now, granted, there was different, we were still in the days of everybody could light a sino or anything could. So in that respect, it was definitely a bit safer. But you got a good logistics team with a good path and refuel points if necessary. Going from tribute down to impasse with test and horde when in that time frame, really well organized for as rapid as it happened. So that one was pretty good. Going back up north from impasse to Declan and Fade, not so much. We lost some stuff doing that one.
All right, so I've got these pages pulled up here. It looks like Test has lost an Athenor on the 16th and a Raitaru on the 18th. Oh no, that was October 2019. So they haven't lost any engineering complex. So they've lost an Athenor, an Osterhaus, and a Fortizar, all of them happening today. As a memory serves, it was like just after downtime today for all of those, but we can check the times. 12:04, 15:13, 17:20. 17:20,
And
is that starting to get into prime time for test? Are they an EUTZ or a USTZ heavy group? Anyone know?
with the alliance that size, it's more like all TZ for them. It's not really one time zone over another. I just want to mention, I guess I'll give the perspective from a line member about moving from one region to another. We did that from Omis moving to Esoteria. One thing that's really helpful is having a lot of capital ships on hand. So a capital ship can work as a suitcase where you have your ship maintenance bay, which you can put assemble ships. Either that's doctrine ship, that can be industrial ships, it can be all kinds of, let's say, riding ship, everything you can put in there. But you can only put charges in the cargo bay. That's a thing. And also you have 10,000 K of fleet hangars that you can put stuff in. So let's say if you have 5 or 6 capital ships, that can be really helpful if you have, let's say, a hangar full of ships to move from one region to another.
Oh yeah, just moving my stuff back to TKE from Delve. If I didn't have a couple of capital ships that I was able to fit all of my stuff into, it would have been a lot harder.
All fair point. So we've talked a bit about Test and Outer Passage. We've talked a bit about Brave and Geminate. What are some other former PAPI groups that we're interested in? I know NC, and PanFam in general, moving back to drone regions, no big change there. If we're looking at Fraternity, we talked about them recently. They're heading into Vale Tribute area, definitely establishing themselves. If we are looking at who's next, I guess PIBC would be the next one on the chopping block to cover. So what space is generally considered PIBC space?
You can just look at Esoteria and Paragon Soul, I think.
All right, Esoteria and Paragon Soul. So you guys are still very, very close to the Imperium. Have we been seeing any sort of hostility happening there?
No, it's actually just a lot of roaming fleets that you see normally before the war even. So it's not really, we haven't seen any big fleets, at least so far, from, like I say, gating from TCAG to GTAC-M, which is the regional gate from PIBC bases to Esoteria, or no, to Paragon Soul. I think part of that is, I think Imperium right now is focusing a lot on recovering or rebuilding after the war. So you don't see them doing a lot of, like, say, heavy military actions around too. So not really that on that end, but I think in Esoteria we just in good old days just back in the days in ratting and mining and things like that.
Fair enough. Are there any big moves? I can't remember who, but I remember us covering a story of a particular alliance joining PIBC. Former Legacy, if memory serves. Am I just crazy?
As far as I'm aware,
Which one are you talking about?
That's the
So
thing,
we
I
have
can't
three.
remember. You have
We have three.
three.
Yeah.
Evictus, Vindictive, and Army of Mango, as far as I'm aware, though that is the PIBC.
Yeah.
Evictus is a former Pravi Block alliance, which ended up in Legacy, if I recall correctly. And my understanding is that Vindictive had been aligned with Winterco before the war with Legacy and ended up aligning themselves with Legacy as a result of that war. I'm less sure about Vindictive, though, since I've not really been following them as much.
Yeah, Vindictive is really like a new alliance, at least to me. I haven't seen them really until the move starts from Omnis to Esoteria. That's when we know there's an alliance even called Vindictive. And yeah, Invictus is our old neighbor. So we used to live in Omnis, and they live right next door to us in Fethabalis. And yeah, so we've known them for a while, but Vindictive is really new for us.
Right on. I do want to take a moment to talk about the conversation going on in chat. There are plenty of people trying to give their takes on where PAPI went wrong, why they lost the war. A particular user, I'm sorry I've lost you in the scroll back, said that it was just a fundamental misunderstanding of Imperium and therefore how to beat them. And Ashtarothi brought up that he wrote an article back in 2016 about sort of the history of the Imperium, where they came and how they got, where they came from and how they got to where they are today. Obviously, this is 5 years old by now, but if you're interested in the history of the culture of the Imperium, the culture of Goonswarm, and from an outside perspective, from Ashtarothi's perspective in particular, it looks like this is a very well put together article. I'm going to be honest, I haven't read it, but it was posted to Crossing Zebras. They have historically been known for having a good editorial team there. So definitely something you may want to go and check out if you want to read up, if you believe into you can't beat the Imperium if you don't understand the Imperium. Alright, let's hop back into talking about AOM. I noticed a very weird thing on Vindictive's member count. They have this sort of steady around 1K, then a massive drop, and then a punch back up. And it seems to coincide with the loss of like 3 to 4 corps, but then they more than make up for it with the addition of a few more corporations. I'm wondering if I can identify who those corps are.
Yeah, just go down to the former corpse and
I don't know a lot about that.
reorder it by joined or departed.
Yeah, I think that's like alliance level stuff. So I don't know. I'm just a line member, so I don't know.
Well, my specific
their
curiosity
stuff, too.
here is, are corporations leaving Vindictive to go and stay with other groups that aren't joining PIBC?
Maybe, but looking at the timeline, that's really recent, I feel like. So I can't really think about anything that recent or any event. Maybe that's war announcement made a lot of group went back, but I can't think about anything big, to be honest.
It's fairly common after a large war, win or lose, that there's going to be some turnover and some corps and CEOs that look at their group and go, what's best for my group? And, you know, sometimes it's heading out on their own, sometimes it's joining another group, or just about every combination they're in.
Yeah, it seems like the major spike in Vindictive numbers came from this corp called Selenium, which joined Vindictive on the 15th, so 2 days ago. 280 members, but they haven't been in an alliance before. I want to check out and see, like, where do these guys come from? Is this an alliance sort of moving out of a low-sec, null-sec area? Were they previously renters? Like, where is this huge spike? Relatively speaking, it's a good fifth of the alliance count for Vindictive. Where are they coming from? While I'm doing that, you brought up, Nick, that these movements are fairly common. Walk me through, if you're the leader of an alliance, a big war just happened, you're reevaluating your position. What factors do you look at in determining, do I stick with my current group or do I look for greener pastures?
Well, the example I'm going to use, and it happens to be where Gregorian ended up there in Cap F, solid group of folks were in CO2 with us in Impasse when all that went to hell. And they looked at it, and their corp leadership looked at it and went, we just moved down here not even a year ago. Do we want to make a move like that again? We're still friendly with Test. Maybe we make a move over there. Maybe that's the best for my people. And, that allows them to save assets, save time, and, get back into playing the game rapidly. Even though making a hell move is part of playing the game, it ain't always the most fun.
Yeah, it also minimizes the problems caused for the industry people, because if you're moving out of some space and you have industry jobs going, you lose that. You don't get your input materials back.
And in the case of, and I don't want to speak for the leadership of CAPF, because obviously I was never with them, other than, I flew with them a lot. They looked at salvation of their people, where, their individual group, it's like, were they married to CO2 or were they married to Eve? What's best for my people to keep them together? Or are we going to start hemorrhaging bodies if we try another big move?
Yeah, CapF was in CO2 for a long time, so even though that was before my time, I can't imagine it being an easy decision.
Fair enough. I did manage to find out, it looks like Selenium, if I'm pronouncing that, are just solidly, they were a low-sec group. They lived in low-sec, they fought in low-sec, Tama, Amamake area, definitely in the low-sec surrounding Jita, and have graduated to moving into Nullsec. So they are moving across the universe. To give you a sense, they previously lived, where would it have been? Was it Lone Trek area, Black Rise area? So up here in Kaldari space. Now they're moving all the way down, presumably at least, to Vindictive space in Esoteria. Where did Vindictive live?
So they currently own stuff in Esoteria. No, they currently own stuff in Paragon Soul and part of.
And Faith of Ballas, yeah. So that's quite the move. Congrats to those guys for moving out of Losec. It'll be interesting to see how they perform if they breathe new life into Vindictive Alliance.
Yeah, so one thing that'll be really interesting is if you look at the solve for for Faith of Ballas. So Faith of Ballas is kind of bottom half of Faith of Ballas is owned by Victus. That's been the case for like a long time. But if you look at the top part, so XNX, which is Fire, owns a good portion of that, but there's also an entrance point to Impasse, which is Red Alliance Coalition space. So, and they are technically part of Imperium. So it'll be really interesting dynamics it's going to play out there.
Oh, that is an interesting dynamic to point out, yeah. So even if Imperium as a whole is focused on Test is next, and perhaps pointing their ire in the direction of Outer Passage, there could be some border friction that flares up with Red Alliance and FI.RE Coalition or PIBC.
Yeah, I don't know what Legacy's plans for resets are, or Test's plans, since Legacy is no more. But I know that PanFam is resetting, included FI.RE Coalition alliances on the reset list, and well, Test might have different plans since they were allied with FI.RE for a long time before the war, but I'm not sure.
I got to bring this up. Space Gator in chat mentions that he's always been impressed that generally groups are allowed a grace period to leave their current alliance or coalition, move somewhere else. I've been watching that for years, and unless you just are a complete d-bag and on the way out, it's almost always it's like a fairly amiable, hey, take your folk, understood, you got X number of hours, we're not going to block you from anything, do what you got to do.
Yeah, that's why with yesterday's announcement, the reset takes effect a week later.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
also if you sorry.
and I guess a good example of that was and I think we're gonna see a number of them here in this our current situation. But earlier at the end of the Casino War, World War B, whatever you want to call it, CO2 went to, as you know, flipped sides, and part of the discussion was with TNT and Bastion if they wanted to come too. They both said no, we're sticking with CFC. That was the prior name of the coalition/alliance. And GigX, who's a freaking warlord, strict orders. These guys all get safe passage. They get a week. They can use our sinos. They can use our stations. No hindering them at all. So, yeah, there's a long history of that.
Yeah, fair
And
enough.
some of the examples on the other side, you can look at the more recent one, right at the end of the war, when original Sinner left NC. That was not on good term, right? I think Vince Dragon even, I wouldn't say threatened, but told them that there is a chance that you won't get the grace period since you left on a pretty bad term.
Yeah, it's all about burning bridges, so to speak. When alliances leave coalitions or when corporations leave alliances, there are still people there. Like there are people behind the players. So even though the alliance may leave this coalition, their corporations, their members, they may want to stay. They may want to come back later in the future. Who knows? The whole alliance may come back later in the future. So if you don't give them that grace period, you're effectively locking yourself out. You're burning that bridge for any future benefit those members could give you. Of course, I say that, and then haven't we seen examples where, who was it? PL, when they decided, hey, we're going to take test and CO2 space in tribute. No grace period, just like about face, we went from helping you conquer this space to taking it from you now. And then even despite that, later on they all bound together to fight the Imperium. So it's not a hard and fast rule, but definitely a good guideline to live by. Don't burn bridges if you don't have to. Alright, let's pivot our focus onto FI.RE, and I think that'll be all we have time for today. FI.RE Coalition, can somebody give me a good rundown of like who they are, just generally speaking, for those unfamiliar?
So FI.RE Coalition is, well, I think I'll go with this since like we used to be friends with them. So they're, I think, led by XX, so that's Legions of Death, with, let's say, Razors and other Russian alliances, so they're Russian time zone. And they're located in the bottom left or the southeast part of the map. And so they own regions like Innsmother and the Turret and places like that. So I think there's one time that they used to control a lot of the map, and they had, from my understanding, they had a sizable conflict with FRAT before too, where FRAT kind of backstabbed them in that area before the winter and test war broke out.
All right, very interesting. I do recall one group who's a member of FI.RE. I want to say it's like Valkyrie Alliance or something.
Yeah, Valkyrie Alliance is one of the members of FI.RE.
Yeah, if memory serves, they have a lot of corporations I used to fly with in Great Wildlands area. They all, Great Wildlands Scalding Pass, they sort of lived there, and then they joined this alliance to go and fight in the war between Legacy and Winter Coalition. And help me if I'm wrong, FI.RE Coalition, the name, is sort of a callback to when there used to be a massive Russian power block in EVE. It was very long-standing, all along the sort of eastern, southeastern side of the map, including the Drone Region. Drone Regions Federation part of that. And they were a major power block in EVE Online, but they slowly got whittled away over time. There was a big kerfuffle with Skill Yourself and other groups, Hard Knocks included, who just really ripped into them up in the drone regions and diminished their power and influence. And so FI.RE Coalition, the name, was a callback to this is the last chance for this Russian community to make its mark on New Eden. Is that
Yeah.
a fair assessment?
FI.RE is short for Final Reunion, if I understand correctly.
Yeah, exactly. So this is definitely like the remains, not necessarily the remains, but the final vestige of a massive Russian power block that's historically been very powerful. And when you look at groups that have been very powerful in the past, Legion of XX Death comes to mind. Once they've tasted that, you've got to imagine there's a certain level of ambition where they want to get it back, right? So I wouldn't expect FI.RE Coalition to sit idly by and just sort of grow and turtle down there. I'd expect them to make some waves. What do you guys think?
God, I hope so. That would be awesome to see in EVE again.
They seem to have picked up a few of the people who are leaving in Legacy, so I think they might be trying to make some waves again.
What groups have joined FI.RE?
Well, Severance is probably the biggest and strongest one. During the war over the past year, after Profit Block collapsed and they moved to Legacy, they were typically the number 3 alliance in Legacy in terms of strength and fleet participation after Test and Brave, but which are both much larger than them and the other Legacy alliances.
It's interesting that Severance is joining because also another member of who were they? Another member of FI.RE Coalition is going to be Ushrakan, right? Where did they live again? Were they installed in PAPI?
Ushrakan has been aligned with FI.RE Coalition. I'm not sure entirely how it works for at least most of the past year. I'm pretty sure they're still in faction warfare as well, but they've been part of FI.RE Coalition and they were included on the reset list for Pandemic Horde.
Yeah, it's got to be an interesting diplomatic situation to resolve if you've got Ushrakan, longtime enemies of PAPI Block, and Severance, longtime members of PAPI Block, now becoming members of the same coalition. I'm wondering if that's going to cause some internal turmoil over there.
Well,
from what I've seen before, probably not.
Why do you say that, Nick?
Because they both went into it with their eyes wide open, knowing the other was there. And their leaders looked at it and went, yeah, that might be my historical enemy, but not right now. And I can definitely see them all working together quite effectively.
You don't think Ushrakan's like role play tendencies and their faction warfare stuff would make them more likely to have an issue?
You know, it again goes back, in my opinion anyway, it goes back to leadership. If the leadership morphs that role play to, you know, this is our new brothers, then no. But, you know, we'll have to wait and see. You're right about that part.
The thing about Ushrakan is that I've been seeing some Discord screenshots that have been posted in various places about their current relationship with FI.RE, which apparently they're being asked to transfer to their SOV to an alliance that hasn't been specified in these screenshots.
Okay.
Is that okay? Yeah. Check out chat. One of the guys mentions that they may be leaving their SOV and Severance taking it over, and Urshikan moving to the Great Wildlands. I hadn't heard that. I'm appreciate the info.
Yeah, I would love to see a source, and at least right now they're still holding their sovereignty. I don't see any reinforcements. So it definitely something to watch in the future.
Like with self-transfer like those, you won't see any reinforcement at all. It will see one side self-destruct iHub and one side place down another one and toast it for like 3 rounds, and that's it. Yeah. And also for, I think, enemies in the past doesn't mean your enemy right now. So we've seen that with, let's say, Frat and Test, right? There was a big war, right, between Legacy and Winterco. But right after that, they work together, right, in this war, in this past war, however you want to call it, to go against Imperium. So friends and foes, it's all part of the game. So yeah, there were enemies before doesn't mean they're enemy right now.
Man, what happened to good old-fashioned Eve grudges? Is the Imperium really the last group that's willing to have proper Eve grudges, or have they also like turned around and forgiven past atrocities, so to speak, for the sake of their present conditions?
No, I think they like having an enemy and, a focus for their ire. And, and overall, it's good for the game, Oh, and I'm sorry, I just got to throw this in there because the gentleman I mentioned earlier that, about Ursa Khan dropping some Sov. I glanced at his name and didn't pay attention to it because it had too many letters and I'm old. It's I Almost Won Eve, and that is a freaking great name.
Haven't we all? I see some people mentioning like blue donuts and stuff like that. I don't think you can, in good faith, make a blue donut comment when we just reviewed multiple large entities with a massive reset standings list. Like that, Eve is not currently in a state of blue donut. Definitely
So
not.
maybe we can talk about the aftermath or the consequences of resetting a mass scale like this.
Okay.
So a lot of things that we have seen right now, they're going even further before the war. So Test or Legacy in general before the war was not blue with PenFem, right? But they were blue with let's say FI.RE Coalition, and we have seen before the war, right? A fraternity or Winterco was blued with PenFem, so that's where the word PenFem came from. Right now, they're also resetting Frat, so we're gonna see a new dynamic that we have never seen before the war. That's gonna be played out over the next week or so after the resetting of standings are completed.
An interesting dynamic to watch for sure. Somebody's mentioning that the blue donut will stop when all current alliances and coalitions completely break up. I think I just hard disagree with you. Like, to what level do they have to break up? Do all the corps need to go their separate ways? Do every member need to leave their corps? Like, I think there's quite a bit of nuance to be had here, and that sort of hardline stance just doesn't mesh with reality. Also mentions that some grudges are larger than others. I'd love to be interested to hear what people think are the strongest grudges in EVE Online right now. Certainly up at the top of the list, you've got Imperium with Test is next. Are there any other groups with really deep-seated grudges that we think are on standing?
Yes.
Yeah.
AOM and Frat.
Oh, and
I'll
what's
tell you,
the
there's one
history there?
that's
Yeah, that's dating back from Serenity. So I mean, that's from the foreseeable future. I will never see. I can't imagine like we're being blued. I mean, I will hope so, like in some degree, so we don't get that many frat harassments a lot of times. Like, but from a reality scale, we can't imagine we are going to be blued.
there's one that I think is one of those simmering, not really grudge, but more animosity. And I recall both sides talking about it, a year plus a year and a half ago. And that was Test and Init, because Init would routinely come down to test space and, quote for content, but they would use Test's jump bridges to get there to shoot the test people. And anytime Test would complain, the goons would say, "Oh, leave it alone. It's not a big deal." So it's almost like, hiding behind Daddy Goon. And I know it irritated the hell out of a lot of Test. I wonder if that's going to hang on.
All right, fair enough. Gregorin, any takes? Any grudges you think we're going to see bear fruit in the future?
I'm not sure about grudges, but the group I'm most interested in seeing how things turn out is Wrecking Crew, because they've they look very different from what they did when I was flying with them.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. We haven't taken a look at Wrecking Crew. Should we? Because they gained. Have they gained anyone from the fallout of this conflict?
Well,
Also, Hateless, thank you for the raid, my dude.
over the past few days, several corporations moved over to Dreadbot. Reikoku, which was in Purple Helmeted Warriors, so already part of RC. Minotaur Death Squad from Test, and Syndicate Enterprise from Test. Syndicate Enterprise was up until a day before they moved Pro God Legends Corp.
Interesting.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I got to jump in because Space Gator makes a good point that I completely. We keep talking about grudges on nullsec warfare, and yeah, valid, absolutely valid. Them wormhole people can hold a grudge. They'll spend months seeding someone else's space just so they can stomp them. So they not only hold a grudge, they can do it for a while and plan your destruction.
Well, you know what, Nick? That's a good enough jumping off point. We've talked a lot about the movers and shakers we can see on the map, but let's shift our focus to those off the map in wormhole space. We did have some developments recently, which is a trend of crab killing in C6 space. Specifically, we saw Hard Knocks, who are a longtime powerhouse in high-class wormholes. For those unfamiliar, wormhole space, you have different classes, roughly corresponding with the level of difficulty of the sites, also their connectivity to K-space, regular space. So the lower levels, C1, 2, and 3, always have a connection to regular space. Higher level 4, 5, and 6 don't have a regular connection to K-space. There could be wandering connections, but it's not guaranteed. They also have significantly more difficult sites, but with that difficulty comes more revenue. And so a lot of farming happens in these higher end sites, C5s and C6s. And it's in those C6 farming groups that we saw some interesting ganks happen. While I pull up the battle reports, has anybody done wormholes from the crew here tonight?
Before I was in Pandemic Horde, and I was living in Wormhole. Honestly, the reason why I joined Horde was because Nullsec was the one area of space I hadn't spent much time living in, so I wanted to try that. So I used to live in a C5 wormhole, and honestly, most of the groups that I encountered a lot have since dead and died, and their members have scattered to other groups.
Yeah, early mid 2014, I was out in the wormholes with Radical Astronauts plundering Eve. Them boys were crazy. A lot of.
I love that name.
Oh,
That's an acronym.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Okay, you know what?
That was a most fun time because they, serious about it. I learned a ton from those guys. And I'm curious what they're doing now. I haven't heard from them in a while.
Maybe we'll pull them up on Zkill. We'll do some Zkill stalking here in a minute. But what's happening in C6 space, and the reason we want to talk about it today, is we've got Hard Knock citizens having a number of their ratting fleets ganked by members of Wholesale Operations. Wholesale, as I understand it, I'm not particularly familiar with the group, but we have sources who tell us that they're trying to establish themselves as sort of a dominant force in wormhole space. Over the summer, Hard Knocks and Laserhawks, which are sort of like the two top dogs, at least from the outside looking in, have had a significant decrease in activity. And so to some, that's a perceived weakness, an opportunity to strike out and not really worry about retaliation in the near term. And so it seems like Wholesale is particularly targeting them. As I understand it, the method of target is known as the bonus wave, and it's a reference to some mechanics that happen within wormhole sites. When capitals land on grid, it spawns extra ships. And so they dropped their capitals with more capitals, specifically phoenixes, And so that's where the name comes from. But these ships, as you can see, 18.6 bill lost just boom in an instant. It's a lot of ISK down the drain, but also a lot of ISK to be earned. And if it continues to happen regularly, it'll be interesting to see what sort of retaliation, if any, we begin to see.
Yeah, I still see a decent amount of activity from Laserhawks, but I'm not sure what's going on with Hard Knocks these days.
I know there was a Reddit thread, I'd have to go and pull it back up, where somebody called out saying, hey, what happened to Hard Knocks? Are they dead? And the leader of Hard Knocks, Braxis, he popped in to say, no, it's just everybody has quiet times. The summer is historically quiet for Hard Knocks. And so our members are enjoying the summer, going outside with all the COVID lockdowns lifting. So they haven't made any sort of public announcement saying, hey, our members are taking a break. I think we could pull them up and see in Dotland to see if they're losing members, perhaps. While I do that, have you guys farmed C6 sites recently? Anybody want to talk about the 3-nag and Wormhole method of ISK making?
I don't know a dang thing about it, so I'll be quiet for a change.
I haven't done it recently, but 3 Naglfars has traditionally been one of the common ways to run sites using that. You use 3 Naglfars so you can complete a site in a single siege cycle.
Fair enough. And then the Rorquals, for those interested, are smart bomb fit. So I need to look up this wormhole. If I were to bet, I would say it's a Magnetar, which has a bonus to smart bomb effectiveness and range.
Yeah, Magnetars are widely sought after for crab holes for that reason.
It's a red giant, excuse me, not a Magnetar. Magnetar bonuses damage, but hurts your tracking. Magnetars, you can see huge bonus to smart bomb. Huge bonus to smart bomb damage and range. So that is interesting. Also worth noting, a bonus to bomb damage. I have historically seen, not recently, but there was a strategy to use bombers, of all things, to bomb waves of rats in these higher end sites using this bomb damage bonus. I'm not sure if it's still viable because a lot of changes have happened to the site since then. Worth mentioning if you're curious and interested in trying something new in EU. So
it may still be viable, but as with many EVE players, they're looking for the most efficient.
Yeah,
go ahead.
That's not the bombers. I think it still works. I'm just pretty sure it's no longer efficient.
I can appreciate the quest for efficiency, but sometimes you just gotta do stuff that's fun. Like, come on now, guys. Bombers killing C6 sites? What's more fun than that? What's up?
It's like we value two things. One is called safety, one is called efficiency. So safety and efficiency are always the two things in your mind. If you want to do any farming in Nullsec, what's the most efficient thing balanced with the most safest thing to do?
And safety is an interesting topic
Go ahead, sorry.
Safety is an interesting topic to discuss when it comes to wormhole space. Because in wormholes, it's rather complicated. You've got the opportunity for, at any time, a new wormhole to open up into your system. So at any time, any other group could just randomly appear and have easy access to your system. There's also no local, so you can't see if any hostiles are currently in system with you. If they're cloaked or they're in a descan immune ship, you don't know they're there. And also, I think in the case of these particular ships, the strategy is to seed these capitals ahead of time and log them out, but have cloaky eyes on grid or just scouting the area to see when the PvEers are active, and then you log in your capitals. But if you're the residents of this wormhole, even if you were active when those caps were initially being seeded, if you didn't have eyes on grid, you wouldn't see them coming in. They didn't pop up in local. You just had to either be within descan range or on the grid when they entered the wormhole. So there's a lot of unknowns when it comes to wormholes, but then there's also safety in the fact that you can roll all of your static connections. So there are some guaranteed wormholes to spawn outgoing from any given system, and you can roll them and not open them up again. So they'll exist, but they haven't connected to the other side yet, which gives you a relatively high degree of safety, in my opinion. You've got something you want to say, Shen?
So safety, I mean, this kind of lock off threats, there are ways to counter it, which is called locator agents. So if you first saw them being locked out, you see their IDs, and then you basically copy them down. You basically run locator agents on them every day, and then you see where they locked off last time. And then if you see there's not in the wormhole, that means you're safe. And for other normal farmings, same in Nullsec, same thing in Wormhole, you scan down all the signatures. You make sure all the wormholes that you think is dangerous is being rolled out. If there's any new signature appeared, dock up, switch to a scanning ships. It's just how much risk you want to take versus how much reward you want to get. So there's a balance between efficiency and safety. A lot of people choose full efficiency. That's you see those hypervelocity carriers running around in Nullsec, but some people view safety more than the efficiency.
Well, the other thing I like about the wormhole style is you really force, I'm not going to say force, but to make that small group to work together, because you're not going to go run a C6 by yourself. Someone's got to be pulling security. So you've got to have a team to do it. And I like that.
It's more like 3 people, but triple boxing another out for rolling, another out for scanning, things like that. Yeah, I mean, with things like multi-boxing, some things that used to be a group work can be done solely.
That's my shtick. I love multi-boxing when it comes to these sorts of sites. I've never done it in high-class wormhole. Back with the old cap escalations, I was our Loki pilot. Back when you would still use cap guns and they could apply if you web stuff down and such. But I haven't done them where it's just caps and a Rorqual before. And certainly it is the case that it's difficult to do multi-boxing, especially with capital ships when you typically have a lot of active modules to manage. I'm not particularly familiar with this method. There used to be situations where you'd have to do refit, but I'm pretty sure with the aggression timer from Siege, you can't do that anymore. Someone correct me if I'm wrong.
I think you can. I think that aggression timer is PvP. I think active PvP timer, the minute timer. But I think those kind of PvE activities you can refit halfway.
All right, fair enough. Well, suffice it to say, interesting things happening in wormhole space. A lot of mechanics that many people aren't familiar with or have the opportunity to interface with. But there could be some brewing aggression between these two groups. At the very least, it'll be nice to see a lot of PvEers dying to the Phoenixes in the future with some more bonus waves. I'm personally hopeful that this is the result of a grudge and it escalates into perhaps an eviction level event. I kind of doubt that's going to happen, but
I just want
know.
to add one more thing. A lot of times, let's say if your group just trying to gank another group in Wormhole, the group that you're trying to kill, the players, they're not the worry. The worry is the rats left behind after you kill those people. Because if those rats switch fire on you, then you're going to get another 2 Dreadout plus whatever the rats are left on the field, which can be scary at times.
Interesting, fair points. All right, any final thoughts for stuff going on today? I do want to mention, before we go, my final thought is a lot of you, I'm sure, are interested in the MER, which was released today for the month of July. Our nerds are running through it right now, jotting down notes, marking down what's interesting, and how to interpret it. So you can keep an eye out. Rich Richmond will be hosting the show tomorrow to discuss what we can learn from July's MER. Other final thoughts?
I got nothing. Appreciate everybody showing up. That's for sure.
Indeed, thank you very much, Nick and Shen and Gagorin, for joining me today. We only got through roughly half the map, but I think we hit most of the major departures and moves happening from the remnants of PAPI Super Coalition, so to speak. We might pick this up again next week, next Tuesday, maybe not. We'll definitely keep our ear to the ground and keep the audience apprised of any new developments. Thank you again for joining us on Talking in Stations. See you tomorrow.